Okay, here is a map from the downtown area of Hillsboro. So you want to make a left on School Street, and you'll see that it's also called Center Road. And then you go a couple miles up, and this road called Concord End Road is up on the right. And it got my attention because it had this sign that said flowers, herbs, vegetable plants. So it's a very rural road. And I believe that there's only one house on it. I did not go all the way to the end. On the map, it shows that it goes all the way up and connects with a road called Boggs Road. But honestly, I do not really believe that. A few times I found a road on the map or on MapQuest, and when I try to follow it to another road, it turns into something like a trail. So at the end of this road, there is a cemetery, and the road becomes more narrow, and it's muddy, and it goes up a hill, and it looked dangerous to go anymore. So I decided to stop there and check out this cemetery called the Garey Cemetery. So when I went to open the gate, it collapsed. There was a peg, a metal peg that came out of the rock that the gate swung on. And I noticed a sign posted on a nearby tree, and it said work in progress. It said volunteers are working with the Hillsborough Cemetery trustee on a restoration and preservation project at this cemetery. Repairing, cleaning, and preservating headstones are the present goals. It says contact Dick Baldwin if you have any questions or would like to help with this project. And one of these gravestones caught my eye because it was in a lot worse shape than any of the others. It looked like it had been smashed apart and was laying flat. And then someone had come and piled rocks up on that gravestone. It looked like they used a piece of the broken gravestone to start a rock pile. So it is kind of an odd thing to see that someone has come and used pieces of the broken headstones to begin these little rock piles that I find all over areas that I investigate that are part of the MK Ultra secret society that practices witchcraft. I have learned that these rock piles are called cairns, and I find them almost in every single location I investigate. So I read all these gravestones, I read all these headstones, and I saw that they were of a family, 3 generations of a family. And this family is called Garey. So it starts with a couple named Joseph and Ruth. And so they are the grandparents. And they have a son that they named John. So John is born in 1778 and he dies in 1857 when he is 79 years old. And he marries a Betsy. So they just drop one of the R's in the spelling of their name. So it's Geary. So they have at least 4 kids. And that includes a John Garey. And at that point, he starts spelling it Gerry. So he is born in 1809. And at some point, he marries a lady called Lucy Ann. And what is strange is that Lucy Ann dies young at 38 years old. And she dies on Christmas Eve. So she dies in 1855 on Christmas Eve when she is 38 years old. So John Garey Jr., he marries another woman named Mary A. and she is born in 1816, and she lives for 74 years and dies in 1890. So let's talk about some of the strange things about this cemetery and when everybody has died. So our attention should go to John Garey Sr. and his wife Betsy. So these two have 3 children that die at a very young age. Winslow is born in 1825 and he dies in 1827 when he was just 2 years old. Almira is born in 1822 and she dies in 1832 when she was just 9 years old. And Harriet was born in 1828 and dies in 1849 when she was just 21 years old. So these children are most likely John Garey Jr.'s siblings, and he appears to be the only one who lives, and he only lives for 62 years. So he wasn't that old either. So based on his siblings here, on all their birth dates, he looks like he is the oldest. So Harriet dies in January of 1849 when she was only 21 years old. And if you look at the date that her mother died, you will see that they died in the same year. So Harriet dies in January of 1849 and her mom, Betsy, dies 3 months later in March of 1849. So I find that unusual that this 21-year-old kid dies 3 months before her mother passes away. It is all very sad. It makes you wonder about this individual named John Garey Sr., who appears to outlive everybody in his family but his son John Jr. So to make things all the more unusual is to state that John Garey Jr.'s headstone is left in. Out of all the headstones in the cemetery, many being a lot older than his is in the worst shape. It looks as if it's been smashed flat and is now laying on its back. And if that is not enough, then someone has come to stack rocks on top of his fallen gravestone. And these stacked rocks are a symbol used in witchcraft. I believe it's a way that they mark people for death. A coven of witches will bring rocks and throw it or stack it at a certain location to mark someone as a target or to mark a ritual sacrifice location. So in my opinion, somebody has come and marked John Garey's headstone here in a very negative manner. So that tells me that they do not like this guy. And one thing you notice is that there is not several gravestones in the cemetery that all belong to his children, like in John Garey Sr.'s case, who's surrounded by his dead children, who died at age 2, 9, and 21. What is also odd is that they have posted a sign here saying that volunteers are working with the Hillsborough Cemetery trustee on a restoration project. So these members of Hillsborough Society are busy in the cemetery working on a project to maintain, restore, and preserve the cemetery. But still, there are these strange little piles of rocks on this fallen headstone, including shattered pieces of other headstones. So that's like saying a group of vandals went into a cemetery and either smashed a headstone or just picked up broken pieces from other people's fallen headstones and then walked it over and stacked it on another person's headstone. In my opinion, that is not only disrespectful, but also a form of vandalism. But apparently, that's what flies in Hillsborough, with an organization headed by a man named Dick Baldwin, who is called the Cemetery Trustee. So they're working on restoring the cemetery, but there are still these marks of what appears to be vandalism left on these headstones, and the gate is rigged to fall off whenever somebody walks inside the cemetery. So everything I've mentioned seems very strange about the Garey cemetery. So at that point I got into my car. So if we go down a little ways, there is another sign posted on the left. It has a box to protect it, and there is this long, intricate explanation about why they have cleared a lot here. They use a lot of fancy terms, I guess, in forestry, and if you were an arborist, that discusses practices of maintaining areas by removing certain trees and allowing other trees to grow. But when you look at that area, it does not appear like that is what they've actually done. It looks like they've just cut down all the trees in an area so that it looks like a clearing. And then someone has gone to all this trouble to explain this in a document entitled, "What Happened Here?" And it's signed, "If you have any questions, contact Fox Forest at foxforest@dred.newhampshire.gov." So the last point I would like to make is that someone is posting these signs all over this area that have to do with the Hillsborough Society, that has to do with the Hillsborough government or the New Hampshire government. So these people are very familiar with this area. They're very familiar with maintaining this area. They're very familiar with working in this area. And this is the type of place where you will find certain headstones marked with stacks of rocks called cairns that you will find in many of my investigations that expose secret societies that practice mind control and pagan witchcraft. On the left is the only house that I see on Concord Inn Road. So I drive back out and I make a right back on the main road, which is called School Street, East Washington, and you'll see that it's also called Center Road. So I make a right back on the main road and I drove up to an area called Hillsborough Center. So when I drove up there, I thought that I was leaving Hillsborough. So I decided to just turn around. And that was when I saw this sign that marked this area as Hillsborough Center. And then I saw 2 art galleries that I will go into full detail about in the next section.